In the chaotic heart of New York's JFK airport, a temple of hurried goodbyes and hopeful hellos, a single piece of paper held the key to a dream. For 17-year-old Serafina Washington, that paper wasn't just a first-class ticket to London. It was a validation, a stepping stone to her future. But standing between her and that future was a gate agent named Karen Miller, a woman whose smile never reached her eyes and whose heart was soured by a quiet, venomous prejudice. In the next few moments, a single violent act of tearing paper would set off a chain reaction that would tear down a life, expose a corporate sickness, and prove that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the most power. This isn't just a story about a flight. It's about the crash landing of a bigot's entire world. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. And if you believe in standing up for justice, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on more stories that expose the truth in our society. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 hummed with a unique kind of energy, a symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and 1,000 overlapping conversations in a dozen languages. It was an ecosystem of controlled chaos, and for Serafina Sarah Washington, it was intoxicating. At 17, she was an old soul, an observer who found beauty in the mundane. Her worn, leather-bound journal was already open on her lap, a new gel pen poised to capture the scene. She wasn't just another teenager on vacation. This trip was the culmination of years of hard work. Her destination was London, where she had been accepted into a prestigious summer photography workshop at the University of the Arts London. Photography was her language, the way she made sense of the world. Her camera, a professional-grade Nikon D850 that was her most prized possession, was nestled securely in her carry-on. Her father had gifted it to her last Christmas, a silent acknowledgement of her talent and dedication. Sarah looked down at her boarding pass, the crisp cardstock still feeling surreal in her hand. Aura Airlines, Flight 101, New York JFK to London, LHR, Seat 2A, First Class. A small, genuine smile graced her lips. First class. It felt absurdly extravagant. When her dad had booked the ticket, she'd protested. "Dad, premium economy is more than fine. I don't need all that." Her father, Robert Washington, had just smiled his warm, reassuring smile. "It's a 9-hour flight, Angel. I want you to be rested and comfortable when you land. Think of it as a creative space. Stretch out, get your thoughts in order, be inspired. You've earned it." Her dad always knew the right thing to say. He was her hero, a man who had built an empire from sheer grit and intellect, yet still had time to check her calculus homework and critique her latest photos with surprising insight. He traveled constantly for work, but he was never more than a phone call away. Sarah was dressed comfortably for the flight. Black joggers, a simple gray hoodie from her high school's art club, and a pair of well-worn Nike sneakers. She wore no makeup, and her hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant puff. She looked, she supposed, like any other teenager. She didn't look like someone who belonged in Seat 2A. And in the charged atmosphere of a busy airport, looks were everything. Across the waiting area, near the podium for Gate B24, she watched the airline staff. One in particular caught her eye. She was a middle-aged woman with a severe blonde bob that looked as rigid as her posture. Her name tag read, Karen. Her smile, when she offered it, was a quick, sharp baring of teeth that never reached her cold blue eyes. Sarah watched as Karen dealt with an elderly couple who seemed confused about their seat assignments. Her voice was laced with a barely concealed impatience, her words clipped and condescending. "Sir, as I've already explained twice, your seats are together, just further back. The system doesn't make mistakes," Karen said, her tone implying that they were the ones who were mistaken. Next, a young man, clearly a backpacker, approached with a question about his carry-on size. Karen eyed his bag with disdain. "That's not going to fit. You'll have to check it. There's a $75 fee." She didn't offer a solution, just a problem with a price tag. Sarah felt a familiar, quiet unease settle in her stomach. She had seen people like Karen before, People who wielded their small amount of authority like a weapon, finding satisfaction in the discomfort of others. They often directed their particular brand of venom towards people who didn't fit their narrow worldview of who belonged where. Sarah, a young black woman, had learned early on how to navigate these encounters, with quiet dignity, unwavering politeness, and a firm grasp of her rights. She took a deep breath, pushing the unease aside. Today was about excitement, about London, about her future. She wouldn't let a sour-faced gate agent tarnish this moment. The junior gate agent, a young man named Mark with kind eyes and a nervous energy, made the pre-boarding announcement. We'd now like to invite our active duty military members and anyone needing special assistance to begin boarding. A few minutes later, the call she was waiting for came. We now welcome our first-class passengers to board at this time. Please have your boarding pass and passport ready. Sarah gathered her things, slipping her journal into her backpack. She slung the bag over her shoulder, took her passport and the precious first-class ticket in hand, and walked towards the gate. She felt a flutter of excitement, the realness of the moment finally hitting her. London was just on the other side of this jet bridge. She joined the short line, standing behind a businessman in a tailored suit who was loudly closing a deal on his phone. He was a portrait of importance, and Karen greeted him with a syrupy, "Welcome aboard, Mr. Sterling. Have a wonderful flight." Then it was Sarah's turn. She stepped forward and placed her passport and boarding pass on the counter. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice soft but clear. Karen Miller looked up. Her eyes flickered from Sarah's face down to her simple hoodie, then to the boarding pass. The professional veneer cracked, replaced by a look of sheer, undisguised disbelief. She picked up the ticket as if it were contaminated. "Seat 2A?" Karen asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. She held the ticket up, her eyes scanning it again, as if looking for a flaw in a forgery. "Yes, that's correct," Sarah replied, keeping her expression neutral, though her heart had begun to beat a little faster. She knew this look. It was the "you don't belong here" look. "This is a first-class ticket," Karen stated as if Sarah were unaware. "I know," Sarah said calmly. Karen leaned forward, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial, condescending whisper. "Honey, did you get separated from your family? Maybe you picked up the wrong ticket by mistake." The use of honey was like a tiny needle prick. It was meant to infantilize her, to put her in her place. "No, this is my ticket," Sarah said, her voice a little firmer now. "I'm traveling alone." Karen's thin lips tightened into a smirk. She exchanged a look with Mark, the junior agent, who quickly looked down at his shoes, clearly uncomfortable. The implication was clear. "Get a load of this one." "Right," Karen said, drawing the word out. She began to type furiously into her computer, her nails making sharp, aggressive clicking sounds against the keys. "I just need to verify a few things. It's just unusual. What's your name?" "It's on the passport and the ticket," Sarah pointed out politely. "Seraphina Washington." "Washington," Karen muttered, typing. A small frown appeared on her face. The name was in the system. The ticket was valid. But the facts didn't align with the story she had already written in her head. A black teenager in a hoodie traveling alone in a $10,000 seat. To Karen, it was an equation that didn't add up. The only possible answer in her mind was fraud. She looked back at Sarah, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "And how was this ticket purchased, Seraphina?" The question hung in the air, a blatant accusation. The passengers in the growing Zone 1 boarding line were starting to stare, their curiosity piqued by the quiet drama unfolding at the podium. Sarah felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. She was being interrogated publicly. "My father purchased it for me," Sarah answered, her voice betraying a slight tremor of anger. She would not let this woman ruin her day. "Your father," Karen repeated flatly. "I see." She tapped her pen on the counter, a smug, all-knowing look on her face. She had found the flaw in the story. "Well, I'm sorry, but we've had a lot of issues with credit card fraud lately. Given the circumstances, your age, The last-minute booking of such an expensive ticket. I'm just not comfortable letting you board. The world seemed to slow down. Sarah stared at her dumbfounded. The circumstances? My age? What does that have to do with anything? The ticket is valid. You can see it right there in your system. The system can be fooled, Karen snapped, her fake politeness dissolving completely. And I'm the final authority at this gate. I'm responsible for the security of this flight. She was creating a scene, drawing more and more attention. Sarah could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her, some with pity, others with the same suspicion as Karen. She was being branded a criminal in front of a crowd. "This is ridiculous," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of humiliation and fury. "I demand to speak to your supervisor." Karen let out a short, sharp laugh. "I am the lead agent here. The supervisor is in another terminal. By the time he gets here, the flight will be gone." She looked down at the ticket in her hand, a cruel glint in her eye. "It's a shame. Such a nice seat, too. It'll go to a paying customer on the standby list." And then, she did it. With a deliberateness that was meant to inflict maximum humiliation, Karen Miller took Serafina Washington's first-class boarding pass in her hands. She held it up for Sarah to see, her smirk widening into a triumphant grin, and then she ripped it in half. Rip. The sound was small, but in the sudden, tense silence of the gate area, it echoed like a gunshot. The two halves of the ticket fluttered onto the counter. The dream to London. The validation. The gift from her father, torn in two. Sarah stared at the pieces of paper, then back at Karen's smug face. The initial shock gave way to a cold, crystalline calm. The observer in her took over, documenting the sneer on Karen's face, the horrified gasp from the young agent Mark, the curious and judgmental stares from the line. Karen pushed the two halves of the ticket towards her. "Now, if you'll please step aside, you're holding up the line for our legitimate first-class passengers." Sarah didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply looked Karen Miller dead in the eye, her gaze steady and unwavering. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and did the one thing Karen Miller could never have anticipated. She unlocked the screen and pressed a single contact on her favorites list. Dad. The name on Sarah's screen was simple. Dad. But the man who answered on the first ring was anything but. Robert Washington was in the middle of a tense quarterly budget meeting in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking downtown Chicago. Spreadsheets and projections covered the massive oak table, and the air was thick with the scent of coffee and corporate anxiety. He was mid-sentence, dissecting a logistics report with surgical precision when his personal phone buzzed. He never took personal calls during these meetings. Ever. But seeing Sarah flash on the screen changed the rules instantly. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but absolute. The room fell silent. He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, turning his back to the room. "Hey, Angel. Aren't you supposed to be in the air by now? Everything okay?" Sarah's voice came through, quieter than usual, but laced with a steel he recognized. The same steel that had propelled him from a working-class neighborhood in Detroit to this very boardroom. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling slightly before steadying itself. "I have a problem at the gate. For Aura Airlines, Flight 101. Robert's paternal instincts went on high alert. "What kind of problem? Did you lose something? Is the flight delayed?" "No, Dad," she said, and he could hear the forced calm in her tone. "The gate agent. Her name is Karen Miller. She refused to let me board. She said she thought my ticket was fraudulent." Robert Washington went still. The city of Chicago, with its sprawling grid and architectural marvels, seemed to disappear. His entire world narrowed to his daughter's voice. "She said what?" "She asked how it was paid for. She mentioned my age. She just ripped up my boarding pass in front of everyone." A silence stretched over the phone line, heavy and dangerous. In the boardroom, the executives exchanged nervous glances. They had never seen their CEO so utterly motionless, so radiating a palpable aura of cold fury. "Ripped it up." The words echoed in Robert's mind. He pictured his daughter, his brilliant, kind, quiet Sarah, standing alone in an airport, being publicly humiliated. An image of her face, crestfallen and embarrassed, flashed in his mind, and something inside him, a carefully controlled and civilized part of his psyche, snapped. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was transformed. The warmth was gone, replaced by a glacial calm that was far more terrifying than shouting. "Put your phone on speaker. Hold it up so she can hear me." "Dad, what are you—" "Just do it, Angel, please." Back at gate B24, Sarah did as she was told. Karen was busy trying to placate a flustered Mark, who kept whispering, "Karen, I really don't think you should have done that. We should have called a supervisor." "I am the supervisor on duty," Karen hissed, "and I handled it. Now help me clear this standby list." "Excuse me," Sarah said, her voice cutting through their argument. "Karen, this call is for you." Karen turned, an exasperated look on her face. "I'm very busy. I've already told you. Just listen," Sarah said, holding out the phone. A man's voice, amplified by the phone's speaker, filled the space around the podium. It was a voice accustomed to command, a voice that didn't need to be raised to be heard. "Is this Miss Karen Miller, lead gate agent for Aura Airlines at gate B24? Karen was taken aback. "Who is this?" she demanded, annoyed at the interruption. "My name is Robert Washington," the voice said. "I am Serafina Washington's father. I'm also the man who purchased her fully paid, non-refundable first-class ticket. I'm curious to hear your official reasoning, as an agent of my chosen carrier, for denying my daughter passage and destroying her boarding documents." The use of "my chosen carrier" was a subtle jab, but it was lost on Karen. All she heard was an angry father. She felt a surge of self-righteousness. "Mr. Washington," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I understand you're upset. However, your daughter fits a profile we're trained to look for, and airline security is my top priority. I made a judgment call based on my experience to protect this flight." "A profile?" Robert's voice was dangerously quiet. "Please, Miss Miller, elaborate on this profile. What specific attributes of my 17-year-old daughter, an honor roll student on her way to a prestigious academic program, flagged her as a security risk? Was it her hoodie? Or perhaps you'd like to be more specific?" Karen began to feel a prickle of sweat on her brow. This man's questions were too precise, too articulate. The passengers still waiting were now openly listening, their phones half raised. This was becoming more than a scene. It was an event. "I don't have to explain my security protocols to you," Karen stammered, falling back on her perceived authority. "It's a confidential matter. It stopped being a confidential matter the moment you chose to humiliate a minor in public, Miss Miller." The voice from the phone retorted, the steel in it hardening. "You didn't just question a ticket. You passed a public judgment based on prejudice. You are an agent of Aura Airlines. Your actions represent the company. And I assure you the company is going to hear about this. Every last detail." Karen scoffed, trying to regain control. "You can file a complaint like everyone else, Mr. Washington. Now, I have a flight to dispatch." "Oh, you won't be dispatching this flight," Robert said. The certainty in his tone was chilling. "In fact, you won't be dispatching any flights ever again. Sarah, can you do me a favor? Can you describe the highest-ranking Aura Airlines employee you see at the gate?" Sarah looked around. The pilot and first officer were just walking down the jet bridge towards the gate area to check the final paperwork. The captain was a woman with sharp features and silver epaulets on her shoulders. "The captain is here," Sarah said, a woman with 4 stripes on her uniform. "Excellent," Robert's voice replied. "Please ask her for her name and employee number." Sarah, feeling a strange sense of empowerment, walked towards the pilot, leaving a stunned Karen at the podium. "Excuse me, Captain." The pilot, a woman named Ava Rostova with a no-nonsense demeanor, turned. "Yes? My name is Serafina Washington. I was supposed to be a passenger on your flight, but I've been denied boarding. My father is on the phone. He'd like to speak with you." Captain Rostova raised an eyebrow but saw the genuine distress in Sarah's eyes and the bizarre standoff happening at the podium. She was a 25-year veteran of the skies. She knew a situation spiraling out of control when she saw one. She took the phone. "This is Captain Eva Rostova. Who am I speaking with?" "Captain Rostova, my name is Robert Washington," the voice said, now with a tone of professional respect. "I apologize for involving you, but your lead gate agent, Miss Karen Miller, has illegally denied my daughter passage and destroyed her travel documents based on what I can only describe as racial profiling. I need you to do two things for me. First, I need you to hold this flight. Do not close that cabin door under any circumstances. Second, I need you to get me the direct line for your JFK station manager, Daniel Chen, immediately." Captain Rostova's eyes widened. This was not some random angry parent. The authority, the specific names, the sheer confidence. It was a level of complaint she had never encountered on a jet bridge. She looked over at Karen, who was now pale and trembling slightly, the reality of the situation beginning to dawn on her. "Sir, holding a flight is a major decision. Captain," Robert's voice cut in firm but not disrespectful, "check your corporate directory. Look up my name, Robert Washington. Then I believe you'll find holding this flight is not only the right decision, but the only decision you can make right now." Something clicked in Captain Rostova's mind. Washington. She hadn't made the connection. She looked from the phone to the quiet, dignified black teenager standing before her. She looked at the name on the first-class manifest she had reviewed an hour ago, Washington S. Then she looked at the name of Aura Airline's parent corporation, a global logistics and travel conglomerate, Washington Global Aviation. Her blood ran cold. She handed the phone back to Sarah. She walked directly to the podium, her face a mask of professionalism. She bypassed Karen completely, speaking to the junior agent, Mark. "Mark, get on the company radio. Get me station manager Daniel Chen. Tell him it's a code red situation at gate B24. Tell him the call is coming from Captain Rostova, on behalf of Robert Washington." The name Robert Washington echoed in the small space. Mark's face went white. He knew that name. Everyone who worked for Aura Airlines knew that name. He was a figure of legend, the founder and majority shareholder, the man who owned the entire airline. Karen Miller heard it too. Her mind reeled, trying to connect the dots. Washington, Serafina Washington, Robert Washington, Washington Global Aviation. It was like watching a puzzle solve itself in slow, horrifying motion. The angry father on the phone was not just some lawyer or businessman. He was the man who signed every single one of their paychecks. Her legs felt weak. The smug confidence drained from her face, replaced by a ghastly, dawning terror. She looked at Serafina Washington, at the teenager in the gray hoodie she had belittled, accused, and humiliated. She hadn't just profiled a passenger. She hadn't just ripped up a ticket. She had ripped up the first-class ticket belonging to the daughter of the man who owned the entire sky she worked in. The ground beneath her feet was no longer solid. It was a gaping abyss, and she was falling fast. The atmosphere at gate B24 had transformed. The low hum of airport activity was now a backdrop to a pocket of suffocating tension. Passengers in line whispered amongst themselves, their phones now openly recording. They knew they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple travel dispute. This was a corporate implosion happening in real time. Karen Miller stood frozen behind the podium, her face the color of ash. The name Robert Washington had detonated in her mind, shattering her reality. Every condescending word she had spoken, every dismissive gesture, every ounce of her smug authority now played back in her memory as a highlight reel of her own career suicide. She stared at Sarah, but she no longer saw a teenager in a hoodie. She saw a ghost, a harbinger of a doom she had personally authored. Mark, the junior agent, was fumbling with the radio, his hands shaking so badly he could barely press the transmit button. "Dispatch, this is gate B24. I need station manager Daniel Chen at our location immediately. It's a code red. On behalf of Captain Rostova and Mr. Robert Washington. The dispatcher on the other end, accustomed to calls about lost baggage and medical assists, must have been stunned. The response was immediate, crackling with a newfound urgency. Copy, B-24, paging Mr. Chen now, ETA 2 minutes. Captain Eva Rostova had taken charge of the situation with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned commander. She turned to Sarah, her entire demeanor softened with a profound, almost maternal concern. Miss Washington, she said, her voice low and steady, on behalf of Aura Airlines and on behalf of myself personally, I am so deeply sorry for what you have just experienced. This is unacceptable. It is not what we stand for. Sarah just nodded, still clutching her phone where her father's voice was a comforting, albeit furious, presence. She was out of her depth, a pawn in a drama that had escalated beyond her comprehension. She hadn't wanted this. She had just wanted to get on her flight. He wants to stay on the line, Sarah whispered to the captain. Of course he does, Rostova murmured, understanding completely. Meanwhile, Daniel Chen was sprinting. The station manager of JFK, one of Aura's busiest and most important hubs, was a man who prided himself on unflappable competence. He was a mid-level executive with ambitions of climbing the corporate ladder, a master of navigating logistical nightmares and soothing the egos of VIPs. The call from dispatch had felt like a physical blow. A code red was reserved for security threats or aircraft emergencies, but the names attached, Rostova and Robert Washington, signified a Category 5 corporate hurricane, and he was standing directly in its path. He ran through the terminal, dodging passengers and baggage carts, his tie flying over his shoulder. He arrived at gate B-24, breathless and sweating, his eyes wide with panic. The scene was even worse than he imagined. A crowd of onlookers, a grim-faced Captain Rostova, a terrified-looking junior agent, a pale and catatonic Karen Miller, and at the center of it all, a young black woman holding a phone. "Captain Rostova," Daniel panted. "What's going on?" dispatch said. Rostova cut him off with a sharp look. "Daniel, this is Miss Serafina Washington. She's a first-class passenger for Flight 101, or she was, until your lead agent here decided to accuse her of fraud and tear up her boarding pass." Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked at Karen, his expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. "She did what?" "And this," Rostova continued, gesturing to the phone in Sarah's hand, "is her father, Mr. Robert Washington. He's been on the line this entire time and would like a word with you." If Daniel Chen had been pale before, he was now translucent. Robert Washington, the founder, the CEO of the parent company, a man he'd only seen in corporate videos and on the cover of Fortune magazine, a man whose displeasure could erase a career with a single email. Sarah, seeing the utter terror on the man's face, hesitantly held out the phone. Daniel took it as if it were a live grenade. "See, sir, Mr. Washington, this is Daniel Chen, station manager at JFK." Robert's voice came through the speaker, no longer glacial but hot, like molten steel. "Mr. Chen, you have 60 seconds to explain to me why one of your employees felt she had the authority to racially profile my daughter, accuse her of grand larceny in public, and destroy her property. And while you formulate that explanation, I want you to know that I am sitting here with my entire legal department on conference call, and my head of public relations is currently drafting a press release. Your 60 seconds starts now." Daniel Chen felt his entire future dissolving. "Sir, I had no knowledge of this. I arrived just now. This is an isolated incident. A terrible, terrible mistake by one employee." "A mistake, Mr. Chen?" Robert's voice boomed. "A mistake is when you spill coffee. This was a decision made by an employee you hired, you trained, and you supervised. This is a cancer, and I need to know how deep the rot goes in your station. While you were sprinting over here, I had my office pull Miss Miller's file. Did you know she has had 12 passenger complaints filed against her in the last 2 years? 3 of them specifically mentioning discriminatory language. Yet, she's still in a lead customer-facing role. Why is that, Daniel?" Daniel had no answer. He didn't know. He had thousands of employees under him. He hadn't seen those files. But he knew in that moment that "I don't know" was the worst possible answer. His negligence was now part of the story. Karen, hearing this, seemed to shrink. Her personnel file, her history, it was all being laid bare in front of her colleagues and a crowd of strangers. She had always dismissed those complaints as people trying to get something for free. Now she saw them as nails in her coffin. "Sir, I take full responsibility," Daniel stammered, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. "I will handle this personally. Miss Miller will be dealt with in the strongest possible terms. And for Miss Washington, we will of course offer our most sincere apologies and a voucher for a future flight." A bitter, humorless laugh crackled from the phone. "A voucher? Daniel, are you listening to yourself? You think this is about a flight? You think a $500 voucher is going to fix this? My daughter was humiliated because of the color of her skin by an agent of a company with my name on it. A voucher doesn't fix that. Firing Miss Miller doesn't even fix that. This is a cultural failure, and the buck stops with me, but it's going to roll through your office on its way up." The line went silent for a moment. Then Robert's voice returned with the chilling finality of a judge passing sentence. "Here is what is going to happen now, Daniel. You will have security escort Miss Miller out of my airport, not to an office, not to HR, out. Her employment with Aura Airlines is terminated effective 10 minutes ago. Her final paycheck will be mailed to her. You will then personally reprint Miss Washington's boarding pass. You will have her escorted through private security screening, and Captain Rostova will personally see her to her seat. The flight will then take off. The delay will be logged under Ground Disruption Management Directive. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." "Crystal clear," Daniel whispered, his career flashing before his eyes. "Good. Then you and I will have a conversation at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. You, me, and the entire head of North American operations. Clear your schedule, Daniel. It's going to be a long day." The line went dead. Daniel Chen handed the phone back to Sira, his hand trembling. He looked at Karen Miller, his face stripped of all collegiality. His own survival now depended on excising her completely. "Karen," he said, his voice hard, "you heard the man. Get your things. Airport security will meet you at the staff entrance." The fight had gone out of Karen completely. There was no defiance left, only a hollowed-out shock. She looked at Sarah one last time, her eyes pleading for... what? Forgiveness? Mercy? She had shown none, and she would receive none. She turned and walked away from the podium like a zombie, leaving her ID badge and her career in ruins behind her. Captain Rostova put a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Let's get you on your plane, Miss Washington." As they turned to leave, a man stepped out from the crowd of onlookers. He was in his late 30s, with a sharp suit and an even sharper gaze. "Excuse me, Captain, Miss Washington." Rostova turned. "Can I help you?" "My name is Julian Croft," he said, holding out a business card. "I'm a senior journalist with the New York Times. I'm in seat 3B, and I think I just found a story that's a lot more important than the one I was flying to London to cover." The jet bridge felt like a portal to another reality. Behind Sira lay the wreckage of Karen Miller's career and the panicked scrambling of the ground staff. Ahead lay the serene, hushed cabin of Aura Airlines' first-class section. The contrast was dizzying. Daniel Chen, now operating on pure adrenaline and a primal fear of unemployment, had personally printed a new boarding pass on pristine cardstock. He'd handed it to Sira with the reverence of a priest offering a sacrament. "Miss Washington, again, my deepest, most profound apologies." Sarah had simply nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Now, stepping onto the aircraft, she was greeted by the flight's purser, a kind-faced man named David who had clearly been briefed. His smile was warm and genuine, tinged with an almost apologetic deference. "Welcome aboard, Miss Washington. My name is David. It is our absolute honor to have you with us today. Please let me show you to your seat." Captain Rostova was still by her side, a steadfast, reassuring presence. She walked with Sira to seat 2A, A spacious pod with its own lie-flat seat, large entertainment screen, and a window overlooking the wing. If there is anything, and I mean anything, you need during this flight, you press this call button, and you ask for me directly, Rostova said, her voice low and earnest. I don't care if it's for a glass of water, or if you just want to talk. We failed you on the ground today. I will not allow that to happen in my sky. Thank you, Captain, Sarah managed to say, her voice barely a whisper, as she settled into the plush seat which felt larger and more luxurious than her dorm room bed. The reality of her power, or rather her father's power, began to sink in. One phone call. That's all it had taken to upend careers, hold a 300-passenger aircraft, and summon a terrified executive from across the airport. It was a strange and unsettling feeling. She had never seen her father's influence wielded so directly, so devastatingly. The journalist Julian Croft boarded a few moments later, taking his seat just behind her. He caught her eye and gave a small, respectful nod, as if to say, "We'll talk later, if you're willing." The rest of the first-class passengers filed in, a mix of business executives and wealthy vacationers. They all shot surreptitious glances her way, whispering to their companions. She was no longer an anonymous teenager. She was a story. She was the girl whose father owned the airline. The cabin door closed with a pressurized hiss. Captain Rostova's voice came over the intercom, first with the standard welcome, and then with an addition. On behalf of the entire crew, I'd like to offer a sincere apology for our delayed departure. The issue on the ground has been resolved, and we appreciate your patience. As the plane pushed back from the gate and began its slow taxi to the runway, Sarah looked out the window. She saw the gate area, now looking small and distant. She imagined Karen Miller being escorted out, her world collapsing. Sarah felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity, not exactly. It was more a profound sadness. A sadness that a person could be so consumed by bitterness and prejudice that they would self-destruct so spectacularly. Once they were in the air and the seatbelt sign was turned off, David, the purser, approached her. "Miss Washington, may I get you something to drink before dinner? Champagne, perhaps. We have a 2008 Dom Perignon." Sarah, who had never had champagne in her life, just shook her head. "Just some ginger ale, please. Thank you." He returned moments later with the drink in a crystal glass, along with a small plate of warm mixed nuts and an amenity kit filled with designer skincare products. "The captain also asked me to pass along this," David said, handing her a handwritten note on Aura Airline stationery. Sarah opened it. "Miss Washington, I know words are insufficient, but I want to state again how sorry I am. The actions of that agent were a betrayal of every principle a flight crew and airline should uphold. Your father, Mr. Washington, didn't just build an airline. He built it on the idea that travel should open minds, not reinforce prejudices. We lost sight of that on the ground today. I promise you, I will personally see to it that this incident becomes a catalyst for real, meaningful change within our company. Enjoy your time in London. Your talent deserves a world without such barriers. Sincerely, Captain Eva Rostova. Sarah folded the note, her eyes stinging with tears for the first time that day. It wasn't the humiliation that brought them on, but this unexpected act of profound kindness and solidarity. An hour into the flight, after the meal service, a multi-course affair that Sarah barely touched, Julian Croft leaned forward slightly from his seat. "Miss Washington, Serafina," he said softly, so as not to be overheard. "My apologies for intruding. I'm Julian Croft. When you feel up to it, I'd be honored to hear your side of what happened back there. Not for a story if you don't want that. Just as one human being to another." Sarah turned in her seat. She looked at him, really looked at him. He didn't seem like a predator sniffing out a scandal. His eyes held a genuine curiosity and empathy. She thought about her journal, her photography. Her passion was about capturing and telling stories. And she was now at the center of a very big one. Maybe staying silent wasn't the answer. Maybe her voice was part of the solution. It wasn't about the ticket. she began, her own voice surprising her with its clarity. It was never about the ticket. It was about what it represented, me in this seat. It was like I was breaking some unwritten rule in her head. Julian listened intently, not taking notes, just absorbing her words. She didn't see a passenger, Sarah continued. She didn't see a student on her way to an arts program. She saw a profile, as my dad said, a young black girl in a place she decided I didn't belong. She didn't just rip up a piece of paper. She tried to rip up my right to be here. She tried to tell me, in front of all those people, that I was worth less than them. She paused, taking a sip of her ginger ale. The most ironic part? My father started this airline with the money he made from his first tech patent. He was a scholarship kid at Stanford, the only black student in most of his engineering classes. He told me he started an airline because he wanted to build something that would connect people, that would make the world feel a little smaller and more accessible for everyone, not just for people who look a certain way. Julian was silent for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle. Your father is Robert Washington, he said, more a statement than a question. Sarah nodded. This is more than just a story about a rude employee, Julian said, his journalistic instincts now fully engaged, but tempered with respect. This is about systemic bias. It's about corporate culture. It's about how prejudice operates not just in the shadows but right out in the open, under the fluorescent lights of a gate podium. Serafina, with your permission, I'd like to write this story, but I'll only do it with your full cooperation and approval. Your voice should be the one that leads it. Sarah thought about Captain Rostova's note, a catalyst for real, meaningful change. She thought about her father's principles. She thought about other young people who might face their own Karen Miller in some other airport, some other classroom, some other store. She met Julian's gaze, a new resolve hardening within her. Okay, she said, let's tell the story. For the next 2 hours, as the plane sped across the Atlantic Ocean through the dark of night, Serafina Washington, the quiet observer, told her story. She was no longer just the subject of the drama. She was becoming its narrator, shaping the legacy of what happened at Gate B-24. And as she spoke, Julian Croft knew this story would be on the front page. The world was about to meet Karen Miller, and more importantly, it was about to meet Serafina Washington. While Serafina was flying east into a new day, Karen Miller was driving into the twilight of her life as she knew it. The escort from airport security had been the most humiliating walk of her life. They weren't unkind, but their professional silence and impassive faces were a verdict in themselves. They walked her to the employee exit, where she was met by a grim-faced HR representative who handed her a simple cardboard box. Your personal effects from your locker, the woman said, avoiding eye contact. Your final paycheck will be mailed. You are no longer permitted on Port Authority or Aura Airlines property. Your security credentials have been revoked. And that was it. 15 years of service, of showing up early and staying late, of dealing with irate passengers and canceled flights, erased in 15 minutes. She drove home in a daze, the city traffic a blur of red taillights. She lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, an apartment she was already struggling to afford. She was 54 years old, divorced, with a son in community college whose tuition she paid for. Her job at Aura wasn't just a job, it was her entire financial and social anchor. When she got home, she poured herself a large glass of cheap white wine and sank onto her worn floral sofa. The anger hadn't hit yet. She was still in a state of shock, a victim of a cosmic injustice as she saw it. It wasn't her fault. It was the girl's. Why was she dressed like that? Why was she traveling alone in first class? It was suspicious. Anyone would have thought so. And the father. Who has a billionaire father? It was a trap. She was set up. This was the narrative she began to build, a fortress of self-pity to protect her from the crushing reality. The first crack in her fortress appeared the next morning. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. OMG Karen, is this you? It's all over the news. Karen's heart hammered against her ribs. She opened her laptop, her hands trembling. And there it was, on the front page of the New York Times website. The privilege of passage, how a gate agent's bias exposed a deeper sickness at Aura Airlines. The byline was Julian Croft. The article was long, detailed, and utterly devastating. It led with a powerful, sympathetic portrait of Serafina, her dreams of being a photographer, her quiet dignity. It quoted Sarah directly, her words about unwritten rules and not belonging resonating with a painful authenticity. Then it pivoted to the incident itself, describing Karen's actions in clinical, damning detail. It mentioned her condescending tone, the public interrogation, and the climactic violent act of ripping the ticket. It named her, Karen Miller, her full name there for the world to see. The article didn't stop there. It included a scathing statement from Robert Washington. The events that took place at our JFK gate are a profound failure and a personal heartbreak. Washington's statement read, Aura Airlines was founded to connect the world, but the actions of this employee served only to divide. This was not a simple customer service issue. It was an act of blatant prejudice that will not be tolerated. The employee involved has been terminated. But this is not enough. This incident has exposed a flaw in our corporate culture, and I am announcing a top-to-bottom independent audit of our hiring, training, and complaint resolution processes. We failed, Serafina, and we will do everything in our power to ensure we never fail another passenger this way again. Karen felt the room spin. Her name, her actions, laid bare for millions to read. The article went viral with breathtaking speed. By noon, Hashgate Agent Karen and Hashfly Aura Right were trending on Twitter. News channels picked up the story, showing blurry cell phone footage of the confrontation that some passenger had inevitably uploaded. Her face was everywhere, a meme, a symbol of modern bigotry. Her phone began to ring incessantly. Friends, neighbors, distant relatives. Some were calling to check on her, others to condemn her. Her son called, his voice filled with a mortified disbelief. Mom, what did you do? She tried to explain her side, her narrative of being set up, of it all being a misunderstanding, but her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The next blow came a week later. She tried to apply for a job at another airline. The HR manager at JetBlue was polite but firm. I'm sorry, Miss Miller, but we've seen the news. Your name is... It's just not possible for us to move forward with your application. She was blacklisted. In the tightly knit aviation industry, she was radioactive. No airline would touch her. She applied for customer service jobs at hotels, at rental car companies, at department stores. The moment they Googled her name, the interview was over. The hard karma, as some online commentators called it, was relentless and multifaceted. It wasn't just the loss of her job, it was the loss of her reputation, her community, her future. Her landlord, citing a clause in her lease about bringing the property into disrepute, a flimsy excuse but one she couldn't afford to fight, gave her a 60-day notice of eviction. Forced to break her lease and with her savings dwindling, she had to move into her sister's spare bedroom in suburban New Jersey, a humiliating retreat. Her days were spent in a fog of regret and resentment, scrolling through an endless stream of online comments calling her a monster, a racist, a villain. One night, unable to sleep, she found an old box of work memorabilia. In it was a certificate for her 5-year service award. She remembered the day she got it. She had been proud. She had felt like she was part of something important, connecting people to their vacations, their families, their new lives. When had that pride curdled into resentment? She thought about all the times she'd been passed over for a promotion. The younger, slicker managers who got the job she felt she deserved. The entitled passengers in first class who treated her like furniture. The constant pressure, the low pay, the feeling of being invisible. Over the years, that bitterness had festered, looking for a target. And it had found one in Serafina, Washington. A young black girl who, in Karen's warped perception, had everything she didn't. Youth, privilege, an easy path. Ripping that ticket had been a release of years of pent-up frustration and prejudice. It was a momentary feeling of power over someone who represented everything she resented. Sitting there in her sister's guest room, surrounded by the ruins of her life, Karen Miller finally understood. She hadn't been set up. She hadn't been the victim of a trap. She had been the architect of her own destruction. The call had not come from outside the house. It had come from within. She had ripped up her own life, one condescending word, one hateful assumption, one torn piece of paper at a time. The silence of her new life was the loudest sound she had ever heard. While Karen Miller's world was shrinking, Serafina's was expanding in ways she had never imagined. Her summer in London was transformative. The photography workshop was everything she had hoped for, a vibrant crucible of creativity and learning. But the events at JFK had cast a long shadow, changing her trajectory. Her story, amplified by Julian Croft's reporting, had become a national conversation about race, class, and corporate responsibility. She received thousands of messages from people all over the world, many sharing their own experiences of discrimination. She was no longer just an aspiring photographer. She had become an accidental activist, a symbol of quiet strength. Her father, Robert Washington, was true to his word. He was a man who viewed problems not as obstacles, but as opportunities for reinvention. The cultural failure at his company was the biggest challenge he had faced since its inception, and he tackled it with the same relentless energy he'd used to build his empire. He didn't just fire Karen and move on. He launched what the media soon dubbed the Washington Overhaul. He hired a renowned diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) firm, led by a formidable academic named Dr. Alana Reed, to conduct the top-to-bottom audit he had promised. The findings were uncomfortable. Dr. Reed's report revealed that while Airlines had anti-discrimination policies on paper, they were poorly enforced. The complaint system was opaque, often protecting managers over employees and customers. Unconscious bias was rampant in hiring and promotion, and the profile Karen had referred to wasn't a formal policy, but an insidious, unwritten rule that existed in the minds of many employees, a gut-feeling bias against people who didn't look the part. Daniel Chen, the JFK station manager, was demoted and moved to a non-customer-facing logistics role, his career permanently stalled. Robert Washington didn't bury the report. He published a summary of its findings in a press release, an act of radical transparency that shocked the corporate world. "We cannot fix what we refuse to see," his statement read. "These findings are a testament to our failure. Today, that changes." And then he announced the centerpiece of his reform, the Serafina Initiative. It wasn't just another mandatory HR training module. It was a comprehensive multi-million-dollar program designed to fundamentally reshape the company's culture. The initiative had three main pillars: empathy-based training. All 50,000 global employees, from baggage handlers to the board of directors, were required to undergo a new, immersive training program. It used virtual reality scenarios, case studies, including a de-identified version of Sarah's story, and facilitated discussions led by DEI experts. The goal was not just to teach rules, but to build empathy. The Clear Skies reporting system. A new confidential reporting system was created, managed by an independent third party. It guaranteed anonymity and protection against retaliation for anyone, employee or customer, who reported an incident of bias or discrimination. A dedicated team was created to investigate every single claim, with their findings reported directly to a new ethics committee on the board. Opportunity pathways. The audit had revealed a lack of diversity in management. The initiative invested heavily in new mentorship programs, scholarships, and targeted recruitment from historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and other minority-serving institutions, designed to create clear pathways to leadership for underrepresented groups. Mark, the junior gate agent who had shown integrity, was among the first to be accepted into the new leadership training track, with a glowing recommendation from Captain Rostova. Robert asked Sarah if he could name the initiative after her. "You're the reason this is happening, Angel," he told her on a video call. "Your grace under pressure is the inspiration for all of it." Sarah hesitated. She didn't want the fame, but then she thought of the letters and messages she'd received. She agreed on one condition. "I want to be involved," she said. "I want to help design the training. I want my photography to be part of it." And so she was. Over the next year, while finishing her senior year of high school, Sarah worked with Dr. Reed's team. She developed a photographic project for the initiative, a series of powerful black and white portraits of Airline's employees of all backgrounds and roles, from the CEO to the cabin cleaners. Each portrait was accompanied by a short story from the subject about their life and their dreams. The project, titled "We Are All Co-Pilots," became a central part of the new training, a visual reminder of the shared humanity within the company. Her voice, once silenced at a gate, was now amplified across a global corporation. 1 year later, the hum at JFK's Terminal 4 was the same, but for Airlines, much had changed. The branding had been subtly updated with a new tagline, "Your journey respected." But the real changes were less visible, yet more profound. At Gate B24, the departure gate for the morning Flight 101 to London, a new lead agent was at the podium. Her name was Maria Rodriguez, a sharp, empathetic woman who had been promoted through the new Opportunity Pathways program. A young man approached the desk, looking nervous. He was a student, flying standby, hoping to get home to London for a family emergency. He was flustered, his documents a bit disorganized. "Hi," Maria said, her smile warm and genuine. "Take a breath. We'll figure this out together. What's your name?" She spoke to him with patience and kindness, her actions a quiet testament to the new culture. Watching her from a distance was Mark, no longer a nervous junior agent, but a confident assistant station manager in training, doing his rounds. He saw the interaction and smiled. This was the new aura. This was the legacy of the Serafina initiative. On board that very flight, sitting in seat 2A, was Serafina Washington herself. She was now 18, on her way back to London, not for a summer workshop, but to begin her freshman year at the University of the Arts London, where she had accepted a full scholarship. Sarah looked out the window at the endless blue sky. She thought of Karen Miller, not with anger anymore, but with a distant, somber understanding. Karen's story was a tragedy of her own making, a cautionary tale about how bitterness can poison a soul. But her own story, she realized, was not about the woman who tore her ticket. It was about what happened after. It was about a father's love, a captain's integrity, a journalist's conviction, and her own discovery that one person's refusal to be diminished could in fact change the world, or at least a little piece of it, 30,000 feet in the air. Her journey was just beginning. The story of Serafina Washington and Karen Miller is a stark reminder that our world is shaped by countless daily interactions. It shows how easily prejudice born from personal bitterness and systemic bias can erupt into an act of public humiliation. But more importantly, it proves that the response to that prejudice is what defines us. It wasn't just about the hard karma that found Karen Miller in the collapse of her career and reputation. It was about the constructive karma that followed. The incident didn't just end with a firing. It ignited a revolution. A father's fury was channeled into corporate reform, and a young woman's quiet dignity became the cornerstone of a new company culture. It's a powerful lesson that true justice isn't only about punishment. It's about building something better from the wreckage. If this story moved you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that expose the truth and inspire change. What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.